In this video, I thought I would do a very broad overview of what the main expenses of owning multifamily are that some I think potentially are overlooked or not accounted for or anticipated as much as maybe they should be. So in this video, it might be a little redundant for some people, or it might be a really good refresher for those who own real estate and maybe are looking to do their budget for this year and want to figure out maybe ways that they can better adjust or better account for some unexpected expenses that they've had in the past. So to get into it, to me, the most important expense and the one that, I get most stressed about is always mortgage payments. Your mortgage payment can be two ways. It could be one that just principal or interest, or if you have an interest-only loan, or you could have one which is very common and I think mandatory for the most part, is if you have like a conventional loan where it's your principal, interest, and it's also your property taxes and insurance. So if you're someone who has bought, let's say you bought a house or in your first duplex, fourplex, something like that, the mortgage payment changes based on the the taxes and property insurance. And that gets projected by the mortgage company. So if you first buy it, they usually project based on what's existing. And a lot of the times the mortgage has to adjust it later, because if you have property taxes, your base changes once you buy it. So then a new property tax is assessed. So then the amount changes. So sometimes you'll have maybe an escrow, and then a following year, your escrow changes because there was a change in your property tax, and the escrow, the mortgage company failed to account for that change. Also, insurance is going up notoriously in many places. So if your insurance adjusts, your mortgage payment might also change, because again, it gets paid by the mortgage, and then they might go, we had a shortfall of $1,000 this year, so we're going to take $1,000 and we're going to spread it across the next 12 months of your mortgage. So your mortgage payment could change, and a lot of people don't expect that, but it does happen. And sometimes if it changes too much based on the taxes and the insurance adjustment for your escrow impound, you might want to reach out to the mortgage company and see if you could potentially get that shortfall spread across more months. It's not always a guarantee, but it is definitely something worth asking the mortgage company. If it goes too high, like I've had it where it's just like a few $1,000s on a landlord, and it's a lot of money, especially if maybe your rents are a little bit lower, so maybe it's a huge hit to you. You can ask your mortgage company, hey, can you adjust my escrow impound? Can you spread it further? Which will then lower the mortgage payment. But mortgage payments are principal and interest usually, and then you might have your property taxes and insurance also folded into that monthly amount. So it leads me to the next expenses, which are property taxes and insurance. Property taxes, you might be in a state where you don't have that, but a lot of states have property taxes. And then insurance. Insurance, usually you want to have it for fire, liability, theft, some sort of natural disaster, depending where you are. And it's usually almost always required by a mortgage company if you have a mortgage on the property that you have insurance. So it's good to have insurance. It's good to make sure that your insurance, it's well documented on it, that if it's an income property, that it's documented as an income property. Some people I've seen try to shortcut and not put that it's, tenant occupied. Like let's say if they have a house and they have a tenant in and they're renting the house. I've seen a lot of people not put that, and you want to avoid that mistake because you're kind of misrepresenting the insurance, the actual use of that property. So always make sure that you have insurance, and as much as you can, that the insurance is able to provide protections that are expected and anticipated as you being a landlord on a residential property. Another one that gets many, many landlords by surprise is just maintenance. Especially a lot of buildings are older. A lot of, people are buying older buildings. That's, you typically step into that. So there might be deferred maintenance from a potential prior owner, or, there's ongoing things like landscaping, general cleanup around the property. There could be heaters, there could be ACs if you have that, so HVAC issues, plumbing, electrical. So there's all things that can pop up and sneak up on you, that things could be going great until they're not. Like a water heater goes out, and that's, an $800 expense you didn't see coming. So with those things, it's good to have some sort of allocation or some sort of savings for that. And how much you save for that or set aside for that really depends. It also depends on a secondary prong of maintenance, which is capital improvements. So maybe you have a building and you anticipate that you're going to need to replace the roof. So you might want to have a savings and project that out. Or if you've just replaced the roof, you might want to have some sort of capital reserve fund or some sort of money set aside that you anticipate for the next time that you have to replace the roof, which maybe, depending where you're at, maybe it's 20 years, but 20 years, if you hold this asset, might come faster than you think. But if there's general improvements that you want to do to the property, you want to budget those out. So it's good to get an idea or an estimate, like maybe you want to redo the plumbing. It's good to have an idea of how much that's going to cost you, and then maybe you're able to save every month until you're able to do that capital improvement. So the maintenance is something that, as much as you try to regulate it, it can come by surprise. So it's good to have reserves for that, and it's good to have reserves for any big capital improvements you anticipate needing at the property. Another one that is variable is utilities. So water, sewage, trash, electricity, gas, common utilities. Those are ones that I'm seeing are going up. Again, I'm in Los Angeles, so my understanding of things are based on what I see in Los Angeles. But for the most part, what I'm seeing as trends in general is that utilities are going up everywhere. So being able to anticipate that, and maybe even having some sort of percentage allocation that you expect, or that if you really want to, go back through utility bills and try to see if you can figure out the differences, like how much they're going up every year, and impute that percentage for next year, or for this year coming up. I think this video is probably going to come out in February. So, if you're still working on your budget, you can anticipate that out, that, okay, utilities are going to go up 3%. And so you could put that as part of your budget. Another thing is property management fees. So a lot of people have property management companies, or if you yourself are a property manager, you might want to figure out what your time is costing you. And maybe it might be worth hiring a management company to manage the property, because it's taking up too much of your time, especially if you're someone who has a career or has a business of their own. Maybe running the building or managing the building is becoming really time consuming and taxing for you, and it's taking you away from your moneymaker, which might be your business. That may have generated the income that you got to buy the property in the first place. So taking in consideration management fees and looking at what would it cost me for a management company to take this over and take it off my hands versus me doing it. And typically management fees are between 4 and 6% that I've seen. So, accounting for that. And again, people don't do this, and this is like a business thing, and I'm guilty of it. You forget to account for your own time and what you're worth. So if you are better utilized focusing on your career or focusing on your business, it might be best to delegate property management to a management company. Vacancy loss. So vacancy loss, typically being very conservative, you could put between 10 and 20%. If you have a smaller building, let's say you have 4 units, you could have 25% vacancy loss if you have 1 vacancy. So you want to account for that and anticipate it, that you might potentially have that. And if you have, a unit coming up and you think that, or the tenant's saying, hey, I'm going to move out, you might want to be able to get into that unit earlier and inspect the unit and figure out what it is you're going to have to do to get that unit market ready, and then come up with a budget for that and immediately act on it so that you can flip the unit, do a unit turnover, and get it on the market and leased. And so vacancy losses, if you have, one coming up, you have a vacancy coming up, I would say, 1-2 months, you should anticipate not getting that income for that unit. Another fee that people also catches them by surprise is legal fees, which might result, maybe you have some sort of dispute with the tenant, maybe you have to do an eviction, maybe you have a dispute with a vendor who, didn't do what they were supposed to do or contracted to do. It's not, hopefully, a huge fee for you, but it is a fee that, you might want to have money set aside in the event that maybe you have to do an eviction down the line. And if you have to do an eviction, you have to, depending on your jurisdiction, you're not going to probably collect rent money, so you're going to have that loss. So those are fees that you also have to, anticipate or build into a budget. Kind of worst case scenario fees. Advertising and marketing is another fee associated with, especially multifamily. If you have vacancies, you have to advertise it. And if you're in a big, metropolis, you're competing probably with a lot of other vacancies. And so you're going to have to, take the costs associated with that, maybe hire a leasing agent that, they're Commissions are usually about 4 or 5%. I believe of the, the initial term, most new leases are about a year. So that's, an expense you have to take into account. Or again, your time and having to, go and show the unit, put it on different websites and those fees, things like that. HOA and condo fees, those, it depends if you have, a rental in those areas. A lot of multifamily doesn't have HOA fees. Those are more single family residences or condos. But if you have some sort of HOA fee, condo fee, obviously that goes into your budget. Capital expenditures, we talked about that earlier, having a reserve for that. But also, I want to go back to that a little bit. You should, when you buy a property, you typically get an inspection done. So the inspection will probably tell you, the plumbing is this old, the electrical is this old. As far as capital expenditures go, it's sometimes worth saving your money and doing the capital expenditure, because all of the little slices, all the little tiny cuts of all the little leaks that happen or all the different problems that happen, those add up. Like a roof, it might be worth replacing the roof because every time it leaks, it's a problem. Your tenants are, it's damaging the unit. You're going to have to repair the unit. It annoys the tenant. The tenant might want some sort of rent credit. It creates a dispute, and it's just annoying to deal with. And no one, when you repair a leaking ceiling, it never looks good. So plumbing is also another one. Plumbing leaks are a huge one. So there's some things, like in LA, if you have a rent controlled building, if you do major capital improvements, you can pass on a portion of that cost to the tenants through a monthly payment that they pay. So if you have something like that, it's worth doing the improvement and either recovering it in some sort of cost recovery like that, or recovering it in the form of raising rents if you're able to do that. Compliance and permits is another expense. That really depends on, again, if you have repairs that require it or you have these major capital improvements, you want to also, that's usually factored into the capital improvements. But there's other compliance things, like if you have a rent control building, you have to file your rent control statements every year, and then you have to pay fees for that. So you also have to pay business taxes. So if you're, like for instance, LA City, you need to have a business tax for your apartment building, a business license, and you pay that tax. If you have an LLC, you pay that tax. And then you pay that fee. You have to do statements of information. You have to do, compliance stuff, do filings. So those are the kind of fees that you should also account for. For instance, LA City, you can pass through, again, a portion of those rent control fees to the tenant, but still got to pay them up front, and you collect it on the back end. And then just in general, the rising cost of operating a building. I would say a good rule of thumb is to look at the change in CPI for your area and impute that to pretty much everything. Your property taxes, how much those are probably going to go up. Your mortgage, that's already defined. Insurance, at least in California, is getting really tricky. That's just getting really, really expensive. But for other things like utilities, like repairs and maintenance, that's something that you can probably impute a change in CPI percentage and account for that in your budget. And for me, I like to overestimate on budgets rather than underestimate on budgets. So those are some of the expenses that are involved with owning multifamily. They're involved with owning pretty much all real estate, but they're some of them I think that people don't account for or, overlook them. But if you're doing your budget and you are in the process of, trying to impute projections, it's good to over project rather than under project. And a lot of the things that you can budget for, especially capital improvements, you can, kind of Google, or you can get an idea. You could talk to other property owners that or you could just have a vendor come out and bid it and figure out what that's going to cost you, and if you have the funds to do it, or do your research on ways that you can go get the funds, and how you're going to recover that, either in the form of raising rents to the extent that you can, or having a vacancy, what your market rent's going to be. So I hope that was helpful. There's a video that I did about having your paperwork organized for banks. It's kind of in the vein of this too. You figure all these things out by having your data readily available to you and looking at and having it organized. So I'll link that video up top. If you like this as well, you might like my weekly newsletter. I send one out every Sunday, and it's predominantly geared towards landlords, property managers. So you can subscribe to that. That will be linked in the description box. It's free, and I do put in, updates on the news dealing with real estate. That being said, thank you for checking out this video, and I'll see you in the next one.